And we appreciate all of you coming. Please listen intently. It's a bit complicated to go through the whole process, but we've worked really hard to make this as simple and digestible as it can possibly be. But listen with an open mind and open ear, and I'm confident that you will be as enthusiastic about this idea as we are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, City Manager Kevin Crawford. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself as your facilitator tonight. My name is Peter Norby. I am a San Diego native, a 34-year resident of Carlsbad. I've been working within cities for 21 years, the last 4 within the City of Carlsbad as Special Projects Coordinator under contract with the city. I've had the opportunity as a native San Diego to give back in public service, and it's been a real joy to serve as a San Diego County Planning Commissioner, and I'm in my 10th year, beginning my 10th year as a San Diego County Planning Commissioner. I'm also an SDI certified facilitator. I won't tell you what that means other than I do a lot of facilitations, and the company, Strength Deployment Inventory, is here in Carlsbad and does a lot of facilitation, Fortune 500 companies and global companies. I am not affiliated with any of the groups up here, nor was I a participant in crafting this community proposal. I'm honored that the group asked me to facilitate their meeting, and my role here really is to do just that, is to facilitate a meeting and to accomplish the goals that were set forth by this group. So tonight's meeting, let's just get started with introductions of the people that you'll be hearing from tonight. And I'd like to start with our city attorney, Celia Brewer. And Celia, if you would just introduce yourself and then just go right down the line.
Gary Barbario, Assistant City Manager, City of Carlsbad.
Pat Bleha, President, North County Advocates.
David Stern, Vice President of Acquisitions and Planning for Lennar Homes.
Marianne Viney, Friends of Buena Vista Reservoir.
Karen Merrill, I'm with Preserve Calavera.
Deanne Weimer, President of Friends of Aviara.
To go over the meeting format tonight, we have 2 hours together. There's basically 2 main tasks that we want to accomplish tonight. The first task that we want to accomplish is to inform you of what the community proposal is. The second task is we want your feedback to help craft or to help provide guidance for this group as they consider their paths forward. There are 2 parts to the meeting. They'll be split roughly equal. So we'll have an hour of presentations time, and then we'll have an hour of time for Q&A and for you to get out and ask the questions. I'd like to talk about that hour a little bit before we get going. We have breakout tables around the room, and the first thing that we're going to do after we hear the presentations is we're going to allow you to go to the tables and the tables of interest and ask the questions. Now, that's not to kind of break you up and divide and conquer. It's simply because we know that you each have an individual maybe item of preference or item of interest, and this allows you to go to the tables and ask questions of those who are up here presenting about the various aspects of this proposal. Essentially, we can get 6 questions answered in the same time that we could get 1 if we just did an hour of presentation or public speaking. That'll be a half hour, and then we'll reconvene for a half hour. The half hour, we'll be hearing public comment as a group. So there is a large crowd here tonight. If I could just see by a show of hands, those of you who right now are contemplating speaking, if you could just, it'll help me kind of craft that last half hour. Okay, so I'm not seeing a lot of hands, so what I'll do as of now is we'll probably do that last half hour orally. So we'll form a line over here. I'll ask you to speak. I'll ask you to keep it brief. Sometimes if you have 70 or 80 people who wish to speak and you only have a half hour, an hour, it's better to do it in a different format, but not seeing that, I think we will do that orally. We're going to begin with an overview of the proposal. We'll then go into an overview of the Lennar Poinsettia 61 project. We'll then hear from the various organizations and their presentations in terms of their involvement in this community proposal. When we get to the public speaking part, we'd like to hear from everybody who wishes to speak. We know that a lot of you have no problem speaking up orally, but we also know that some are shy and some don't like crowds or don't want to speak, so we have comment cards for you to offer your proposals. So we want to hear from you in a variety of ways. If you do not wish to speak but you have a comment, you can fill out a comment card and they're at the tables to do that. We ask that you be respectful of all presenters and their diverse perspectives. And let me just go ahead one slide, if you can see that. Depending on where you're standing, your perspective may be different. So if you're kind of standing over here, you might see a square. And if you're standing over there, you might see a circle. And it's important to understand, especially this meeting tonight, that there are many, many different perspectives in the room. So as you speak, your hope as a speaker is that people are listening to you. You have spent a lot of time or a lot of thought crafting your remarks tonight, and you hope the group is listening. You also have an obligation, once you're done speaking, to listen to the others. And you're listening for perspective, because the hope is, as we come together as a community and we hear all perspectives, we can gain an understanding that will allow us to move forward. We ask that you comment on the topic of the community proposal. So lots of things going on in Carlsbad. Tonight's meeting, we are not rewriting the growth management plan. We are not rewriting the development standards for Carlsbad. We are not contemplating does Group A or Group B have a better chance in the court system. The only thing that we're doing tonight, we'd like you to focus your comments on the community proposal. We ask that you be respectful of your community members' time, so when you're at the boards in the breakout sessions or when you're speaking, we'd ask that you share your time, that you be succinct, that you get the questions asked and the answers that you want. But if there are several members around the table, share that time with your fellow community members. It doesn't look like we have a whole lot of speakers, but as we get into that, allow me as your facilitator, in order to get more people heard, I'm going to ask that you be succinct, keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll just kind of keep a little timer going. I'll ask you to summarize when you're done, and then I'll say thank you. I am not trying to be forceful with you. I'm simply trying to get as much public comment from as many members as possible who wish to speak. And lastly, this is important. I think if we take a look around our nation the last year and we see what has been going on and some of the conflict that's been going on. We're here tonight. Our city is here, our community groups are here, our citizens here, and we're participating in a process to help make Carlsbad better. That is to be celebrated. I know it can be drudgery to come to these meetings. I know that you have options. You could be home with loved ones, you could be having a dinner, you could be out to the movies, you could be enjoying a recreational passion. So in addition to the warm welcome, we want to thank you for being here. Your presence is meaningful and your input in this is meaningful. And celebrate. This is really a very, very good thing that's going on. With that, you might have noticed something a little bit unusual for a civic meeting. There's a lot of kind of home baked goods back there. So call it cupcake diplomacy. But we'd like you to participate in the breakout session if you haven't already, and thank you to the members of the panel and the city who have brought these home-baked goods for you today. With that, we will begin with the proposal. I'm sorry, pardon me? Sure. Okay, so we have the lights on pretty high. Is the screen okay, or would you like the lights a little bit lower? So a little bit lower on the lights. Is that good? Okay. We will get started with this presentation, beginning with Celia Brewer, City Attorney, City of Carlsbad.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right? If you don't mind, I am going to stand and move around simply because I have a lot of energy and that works better for me. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know you had to brave the elements to get here. And no matter what happens with this proposal tonight, I hope you will appreciate and respect that everybody at this table has taken an opportunity and a risk to work together towards some benefits, work collaboratively towards some benefits for the community that might not otherwise occur. And I say this because if you know me, I think it is really easy to be a deal breaker. It's really easy to throw harpoons, to criticize, to stand your ground and be obstinate. It is much more difficult to be a deal maker, and that is to take risks, to be creative, to solve problems, and even to be a little bit vulnerable being here together. What you see before you is a developer, a city staff, and also several local community groups. And we have come together, even despite some historical differences, to work together on this plan. So no matter what, I hope you give everyone here a lot of credit for doing it because I'd like to. And I will even add that the food that is made because people care. And I think at the end of the presentation, if nothing else, you will have no doubt that everybody here cares deeply about the city and about the results that we're trying to get for the city of Carlsbad. Okay, so with that, let me start. The first thing I want to do is I want to explain to all of you how this proposal came into being. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding, and I don't want there to be any mystery about how this proposal came into being. The proposal is actually born out of litigation. North County advocates sued the city of Carlsbad in October of 2015 over the city's approval of its general plan. They sued under CEQA against the general plan adoption and the climate action plan. Now, what usually happens in a CEQA lawsuit is the parties are required to get together and try to settle the lawsuit. Sometimes people do that with a phone call and say, we have no reason to talk. It doesn't take any time at all. We are actually still in those settlement negotiations because we took them really seriously. And we tried to sit down with North County advocates, and we've been working on a list of things that they would like to see the city do. One of those items, only one, the Buena Vista Reservoir, was a big ask of theirs. And I'm going to point out to you how it ended up being a really pivotal piece. What we did with North County advocates is we agreed that we would take that single item and go talk to the city council and say, City Council, can we get your permission to talk about this one item out of the list? Can we waive the attorney-client privilege and go talk to a wider group? So we were willing to do that, and the city gave us the permission and authorized us to do that. So we've been working in concentric circles. We started with the city council. We needed them to waive the attorney-client privilege. And we went to North County advocates and said, North County advocates, we think that this one particular piece, we have some solutions for, and we'd like to talk about this in a wider circle. And North County advocates said yes. We eventually grew that group and went to Lennar and said, Lennar, would you like to talk about this proposal with us? Stakeholder groups, would you like to talk about this proposal? We have all vetted this proposal that you're going to hear, and we think there's sufficient merit that we were willing to air it publicly. Okay, so I hope that you'll agree with us. So the reason that we realized there was some synchronicity, that was the word the city manager used, is because the city staff realized we had 3 different teams talking about the Buena Vista Reservoir, and we realized it was kind of a centerpiece of a lot of things. So number one, I just told you that it turned out to be one of the big items that would help resolve the general plan lawsuit. Number two, second prong of what I call the 3-prong solution, or a 3-legged stool, is that we have a neighborhood group. Buena Vista, now known as the Friends of Buena Vista Reservoir, talking about making a piece of property that the city originally had slated for sale. We were going to sell it. It's zoned for single-family residential use. We planned to sell it. But the neighbors came out and said, hey, we would like to see that be a park. So the city suspended its efforts at sale and allowed this group to go and explore making this a park. But what the city tasked the group with was trying to find a source of funding. This park is not part of our growth management plan. There is no dedicated city source of funding for this park. And so the city said, hey, we'll allow you to consider using this piece of property. And that property is valued at $3.2 to $5.9 million. So that's a pretty significant offer on the table. But it is challenging to get an assessment district or some other revenue source, grant funding, et cetera, for that development of the park. So that's kind of where that was stalled. Finally, we had an additional prong, another city team, and it was working on the Poinsettia 61 development. So you're going to hear a lot more from Lennar tonight. Please don't be frustrated with me. You're going to hear a lot more with them tonight about their development. I am only talking about the Lennar project as it relates to this proposal, but you will hear more about their project later. But Lennar, in order to design a project that accommodated neighborhood interests and accommodated school sites, et cetera, actually ended up using or impinging or encroaching on some of their, what we call HMP, Habitat Management Plan. You guys all familiar with that? That's our protected habitat. So it ended up impinging, and they needed to get some offset land to mitigate that impingement into that site. So Lennar approached the city and said, what if we took some of the property at Veterans Park and redesignated it from developable parkland to habitat management, HMP, protected habitat? Would the city consider such a thing? And we thought, heavens, why would a city do such a thing? But they happened to need 3.1 acres, and it made us think, wow, that Buena Vista Reservoir Park happens to be 3.1 acres. So you can see why this idea was born, because we thought, what if we put all these things together and tried to solve this collaboratively, instead of continuing to deal with each of the pieces individually, instead of continuing to battle with each other. Because now, with Lennar at the table, with an interest in obtaining city HMP, all of a sudden we have a potential revenue source to solve the Buena Vista Reservoir Park. Are you guys all with me? Okay, good, because I know it's complicated. Oops, excuse me. I know it's a little bit complicated. So that is how this group came to be. So before we go into the proposal in any more detail, because I don't want to overtalk you, I want to say that this is not unprecedented. I will give you an example that occurred down in San Diego, down in South Bay, with the approval of the Chula Vista Bayfront Master Plan. That plan had been in the works for the city of Chula Vista for, I believe, 12 years, and it just wasn't getting anywhere. There were a lot of opposition groups, there were a lot of stakeholders, and what happened ultimately is the city of Chula Vista, the Port of San Diego, and I think almost a dozen of the local community groups and environmental groups finally worked together on a settlement proposal, and there was a lot of give and take. As a result of that, there was mitigation that was offered that exceeded what was required by the EIR. Development was allowed to go higher than some people wanted, but with that height, they were able to preserve view corridors and provide additional habitat. Ultimately, all the parties signed on to that agreement, and they went unanimously to the Coastal Commission, where it was approved, they went hand in hand to the Coastal Commission, where it was approved unanimously, with huge accolades to the community for solving its own problems, for using its resources to come up with a great benefit. So I know that it can be done. Our CEQA attorney, who's here tonight, our environmental attorney, Mike Hogan, was part of that proposal. I came in at the tail end, and I know that if it worked there on such a huge and complex issue, we can use this collaborative style here. So I'm a believer, I'm a firm believer, that what we're really doing here, whether you call it litigation or permit approval, is we're problem solving. And I think if we problem solve together, there is going to be more benefit for this community on the table. Because without this proposal, we still have all the same problems with no solutions. Well, or maybe with less preferable solutions. Okay, so let's talk about the proposal. I'm going to talk about each of what I call the three legs of the three-legged stool. And I say that because if this proposal fails on any one leg, the whole thing topples. So if it doesn't settle a general plan, then everything ends. If it doesn't provide the park, everything ends. If it doesn't provide some of the other benefits that we're looking for Poinsettia 61, it ends. So I want to make that clear up front. Okay, so let's talk about the litigation first, the lawsuit. I'm the lawyer. I usually handle the lawsuits. And what we would usually do in the case of a CEQA lawsuit is we'd litigate it, right? And there would be a winner and there would be a loser. The city would either be the winner, in which case we would get, the litigation would end, the plaintiffs would get nothing, and we would go on our merry way. Or we would be the loser. The loser in a CEQA lawsuit, we'd have to pay the fees of the plaintiff, and then we would likely have to update our environmental documentation, recertify it, and go on our merry way. What the court will not do in a CEQA lawsuit is order us to go build a park, right? That's just not a feasible solution. That's not something a court has the authority to do. So that's why we wouldn't necessarily recommend the solution before you if we were just trying to resolve the litigation. It's only because there's so much other community benefit that we think that the city has the potential to use this prime piece of property to get these other benefits. Next, we already talked a little bit about the Buena Vista Reservoir property, right? The property was scheduled, it was determined by the city council to be a surplus piece of property. It was scheduled for sale. We went through a statutory procedure, and on the eve of approval of that statutory procedure and the sale, we had a bunch of citizens appear at the city council meeting, and they said, please stop, take it off the chopping block, give us a chance, let us look at it, let us give it a try, and let us come up with a funding solution for this. So we explained about the growth management plan, we explained that there was no funding for this, we explained there was no precedent for spending money outside of growth management plan, and they went to work and they rolled up their sleeves. However, thus far, they've been challenged and haven't been able to come up with a revenue source. And until we had Lennar step up to the table as a potential revenue source, and I'm sorry, Lennar, it's just the way cities look at developers. Sometimes. It wasn't until then that we thought, wow, we might have a solution on the table. So without this solution, there probably is no park on the horizon for the Buena Vista Reservoir. That doesn't mean it would never happen, but there's not one in the foreseeable future because we haven't come up with any additional tools that might solve this. So finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about Lennar, and then I'll turn it over to Lennar to go into their development in much greater detail. Lennar is a developer, and as you know, developers, in order to get approval of their projects, often work closely with their communities, and Lennar gets credit for coming in and working with the local community groups. In order to accommodate and try to garner favor and get approval of their project, they made some project design changes that were beneficial to the community, but are challenging them with respect to their habitat mitigation. So for the Lennar coming over to the city and saying, city, would you consider doing this? Would you consider taking 3.1 acres at Veterans Park of developable parkland and converting that to additional habitat? It's not something we'd normally consider. We'd say, I'm sorry, we have no reason in giving any city parkland up to a developer for any reason. However, there's two factors. I already described one. Lennar could build the park, so now we do get 3.1 acres of additional open space. So we don't lose any park, at least, and we do get additional open space. But also, Lennar, as the developer, would be responsible for coming in and putting in road improvements at the end of Poinsettia. That happens to be an area that is also not triggered by growth management for development yet, and yet we hear constant complaints that there's a lot of congestion in that area, and for traffic safety reasons, people really want that problem solved. Lennar has the capacity to solve that problem and put in those road improvements. You've also even heard from city council members up on the dais. They've never taken a vote on it, but up on the dais, many have expressed concerns, safety concerns that arose during the last fire. They felt like if we had had that reach improved, we would have been in a better position than we would have without it. So that's why we thought if we put all these pieces in a pot and stir them together, we think we can make them come out better than they would have individually. Because without trying this solution, without this proposal, we end up with a lawsuit that's going to be won or lost. We end up with maybe a park someday in the remote future at Buena Vista Reservoir, and Lennar is going to have to figure out a way to either find some additional mitigation, which is going to be challenging, or change their design proposal, which was, supposed to be optimal for the community. So that's how we got here. Let's see. We do have some summary slides. These 4 sites, I don't know how well you can see them. These are the 4 sites that are involved in the real property and habitat transaction. Oh, here we have an actual illustration of the developable park. Shrinking here, open space growing. That would happen at Veterans Park. Did you guys catch that? Because she can probably make it happen again. See? See the line shift? This is about as good as I do it. Here we have the illustration. We would be losing 3.1 acres of parkland, developable parkland at Veterans Park. We would be gaining 3.1 acres of park at Buena Vista Reservoir site. Oh, I'm so sorry, I failed entirely to mention this. In addition to the 3.1 acres of habitat, Lennar has additional mitigation requirements, probably up to, that's not an exact number, 5.7 acres that would be added to our HMP at Aviara. So at Aviara Park, they would take what I believe is kind of rough or degraded land, and they would restore that habitat and then add it to the HMP. So the city, as a result, is going to end up with more open space, more habitat, and more trails as a result of this proposal. Vacant property becomes a new park. We've talked about that. Poinsettia 61 proceeds. You get the missing link of Poinsettia Lane. The reservoir becomes a park, and the lawsuit is settled. Come on, you get points for creativity, don't we? So we also get additional, I already went over this one, protected habitat, et cetera. I think that concludes the slides, but I do have a couple of other housekeeping issues. Number one, this open space idea was analyzed as an alternative in Lennar's EIR that's already been circulated, and we've already gotten comments on it. One of the things that's driving the project timing is Lennar is scheduled to go to the Planning Commission in early February. Roughly a month after that, they would be going to the City Council. All of the agreements between these parties up here, assuming we can resolve our remaining differences, we've all agreed this far to come to the public meeting, would need to be resolved by then. And I want to make it clear that any agreement that involves all the parties at this table, what I call a community benefit or a community settlement agreement, would be a public agreement that would go to the council. You would all see it before you went to that hearing that night. There remains, however, confidential settlement agreements that are taking place between the city and North County advocates. Those are still involved in the litigation. They would also need to be resolved that night, but that agreement would not become public until after it had been approved and signed by both parties, and then all settlement agreements of the city become public. So I just want to take away any mystery associated with the litigation, and I hope you all understand. When we get to the breakout tables, I'll be at one of them, and you're welcome to ask more questions about that, but I think much more interesting, you're going to hear from the rest of these parties, and their parts are a lot more interesting than the legal parts. So with that, I would like to introduce Lennar to talk a little bit more about their project in greater detail.
Great. Thank you, Celia. First, I'd like to thank all of you for coming this evening. And something I'd like you to know is that I myself am a 20-year-plus resident of the city of Carlsbad. And when I first moved here in 1994, I lived right off of Poinsettia. So I am your neighbor, and as a resident, I am also very proud to be part of this solution and to present you with our proposed community. So first, maybe we start with a little bit of history. Prior to Lennar coming into the picture, there were two previous project applications filed on this property. They were for quite a bit more density. The first one was in 2003, known as the Bridges at Poinsettia, called for 497 townhomes. That was followed, after that didn't go forward, by a senior community known as Pontebello that had about 428 units. That did not move forward either, and then, of course, the recession hit. The property was foreclosed on, and after the recession, about 2.5 years ago, we reached an agreement actually went into an FDIC fund, and we reached agreement with the fund manager to enter into an option agreement where we would purchase the property upon entitlement. About 2 years ago, we filed an application with the city. We can go to the next slide. Actually, go one more if you will, please. Perfect. Our application was for 140 single-family homes. And I should point out that 17 of them were on Ambrosia Lane, kind of in the same area where the seniors project had previously proposed their affordable units. As part of our process, we went around and we met with pretty much every single homeowners association and neighborhood group in the area surrounding our property. There's 9 of them. If we can go back one slide, please. Perfect. You see them all there. And one thing that we continuously heard, first of all, most everyone was happy about the thought of Poinsettia going through and taking the traffic off of Cassia, but they were concerned about Ambrosia. And it was highlighted when we had the fire and folks had trouble getting to the school where their kids were. So we did listen to the community. It was a hard decision for us because it was economically impactful, but we agreed to get rid of the 17 homes on Ambrosia, and we amended our application. And you can see, I'm sorry if we go back to the next slide. So you can see kind of before and after. It is now 123 homes, none of them on Poinsettia. Also, for about the past year and a half, we have been working not only with the city, but hand in hand with the environmental agencies, the Coastal Commission, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the State Department of Fish and Wildlife as well. They all administer the city's habitat management plan. And so we have to tweak and pull our design according to some of their issues and try to blend that with the community issues. And the project was resolved slightly and resulted in this need that we're talking about this evening. Can you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. Okay, so to describe our project briefly, as I said, 123 single-family homes. The property is 51 total acres. What we tried to do was concentrate the housing on the northernmost 20 acres of the property, which is the area that was historically farmed and is disturbed. We couldn't keep it entirely on that because one of the things is we had to provide a little bit of a wildlife corridor in the southwest corner. If you go to the next slide, please. You can see a little corner that sticks out that is disturbed area. So we kind of had to push and pull, and we lost that. We pushed the homes down into the southwest, and that created the need for the mitigation. There's also an additional 5.6 acres being used for the Poinsettia Road extension. Altogether, that left 25.3 acres of on-site natural open space, which will be preserved and will also be enhanced and revegetated. You can see probably on the aerial there are several disturbed areas. In addition, we are doing off-site preservation and enhancement. 10 of the acres will be adjacent to the property in what's known as the Cavane parcels down in the southeast corner. 5.7 in Aviara Park, as Celia mentioned, and 3.1 in Veterans Park. And while that's required mitigation, we are going above and beyond in terms of adding acreage to the city's habitat management plan. So if you look at what's in it today versus what will be in it after our community is implemented, the city will gain roughly 6 acres to their habitat management plan. And as you might imagine, that was somewhat exciting to the resource agencies. We also believe that our project, when implemented, will result in a biologically superior situation because the way the HMP is today, it preserves part of the farmed area and allows more development in the existing natural area than what we're doing. Next slide, please. This basically shows where the off-site mitigation is, so you can see Aviara Park, which is very close by, and then Veterans Park. And it also shows the Buena Vista Reservoir site. This is a close-up of Veterans Park. It will be up to the city as to where this 3 acres of additional habitat creation happens, but there is a stipulation that it be adjacent to existing habitat. And this is Aviara Park. So in Aviara Park, you actually have an unused area. It's hillside. It was disturbed by the fire. So none of the existing facilities in Aviara Park are being impacted. but we're going to restore the hillside, and we're going to add that to the HMP. So there's like a gap between where the park is and where the HMP starts. We'll fill that in. Okay. Now to our community itself. So one of the big things, as was mentioned earlier, is the connection of Poinsettia Road. It removes the need for traffic to cut through a lot of the existing neighborhoods, particularly Cassia is facing the brunt of it. We also believe that a certain amount of that traffic goes down Ambrosia to Aviara Parkway. This will allow, as the general plan calls for, the traffic to go through. Now, I should mention the project's going to build all 4 lanes. We're going to build the median. We're going to have 50-foot wide parkways on either side with trails. You know, if the project did not happen and it was ultimately built as a public works project, it would just be the interior lanes. So we're going to do all the frontage improvements. Most importantly, we are building a 275-foot wide bridge to span the drainage area where there's riparian habitat. Allow wildlife movement underneath. That is an extremely costly solution as opposed to, let's say, a drainage culvert. But it was important to all the environmental groups, to the agencies, et cetera. So we will be doing that and implementing it with our project. We have a public trail in the SDG&E easement. Perhaps we go to the next slide, please. So that shows the connection of Poinsettia. And you can see that kind of scar that cuts down across northeast to southwest. That is in the SDG&E easement. So subject to their permission, we'll put a trail in there and we'll restore the other disturbed area. We're going to have 2 neighborhood parks for our residents as well as a rec center. We're going to have RV storage, but it'll be in a place that will be out of the public view. And we'll have energy efficient homes. All of them will have solar panels. So that's something that Lennar does. And last but not least, much needed mid-level housing. We're projecting prices in the 700,000s to low 800s. So that's that kind of mid-range housing that's just simply not enough of it's being built today. There's a great need. There's a close-up of the bridge and a close-up of our project. And we have the boards over here. If you guys want to come by later and look at it in more detail and ask questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, with that, we'll go to Mary Ann Viney, who's representative of the Buena Vista Reservoir site.
Thank you to everyone for coming tonight. I'm just so excited to be here and to talk about a possible park at the Buena Vista Reservoir site. Could I have the first slide, please? Okay, so we are Friends of Buena Vista Reservoir, and our mission is to protect and preserve the Buena Vista Reservoir site as an, a neighborhood park. And actually, I should say it's a historic site. Right, could I have the next? So this is the site for the Buena Vista Reservoir. It's located on Buena Vista Way near the Cole Library. It's about 1 mile east of the 5 freeway in Old Carlsbad. So unlike Carlsbad's newer master plan communities, Old Carlsbad does not have many smaller neighborhood parks. So instead of building houses on the site of this abandoned reservoir, this proposal would provide a way to fund the creation of a peaceful place where residents can enjoy Carlsbad's natural beauty. Thank you. So this 3.1 acre Buena Vista Reservoir site contains the first large reservoir of its type ever built in the town of Carlsbad. The reservoir was constructed in 1919 to supply the surrounding fledgling farming community with water. The Buena Vista Reservoir provided water for the agricultural economy and for the commercial and residential development for about 40 years in Carlsbad. The importance of the reservoir as a water source waned as time passed. The reservoir was abandoned operationally in the 1960s and subsequently was used as a city maintenance and storage facility, and it was fenced in. So residents have desired a park at the Buena Vista Reservoir for about 25 years or more. In a 1989 report to the city, a 14-member Citizens Committee recommended that the Buena Vista Reservoir should be developed into a park. And it was again recommended before the City Council back in 1997. And as Celia was talking, in September of 2013, the City of Carlsbad approved a resolution for intent to sell the reservoir. And then at the November 5th, 2013 City of Carlsbad Council meeting, residents who lived near the reservoir and other residents, in fact, went and protested the sale. And as a result, the City of Carlsbad decided to defer the sale temporarily. So since about November of 2013, residents have, requested that the city and the staff work with the community in order to create a park there. So we've actually have a long history of trying to get a park at the reservoir. So the property is quite lovely in terms of the views. It has potential really for panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean and surrounding lands, and it really, really does encompass, I think, the natural beauty of Carlsbad. We did ask our friend, who's an author and artist, Janelle Cannon, to depict our neighborhood's vision for the park at the site. And so this is the lovely rendering that Janelle came up with, and I think it perfectly expresses the joyful place and that the park could be. Next slide, please. So why a park? Well, we'd like to have a passive use neighborhood park, informal play, a natural setting for residents in walking and biking distance, picnic tables, low-level lighting for safety only, and also we feel that the park would help preserve a sense of place for the history of the early farming community that surrounded the reservoir and help establish Carlsbad as an agricultural hub, including, avocado production and flower farming. So again, thank you for coming here, and we want to thank everyone who was involved in this proposal. Thanks.
Next, we'll hear from North County Advocates.
Okay, yes. North County Advocates, or NCA, is a nonprofit corporation based in Carlsbad. And I think our mission statement is up there, right?
Excuse me to the speaker, if I could ask you just to get a little closer to your microphone.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, so we're a nonprofit corporation based in Carlsbad. And so as you can see, our mission is listed. In a nutshell, we strive to have as much quality open space as possible saved and a quality environment which is conducive to the welfare of plants and animals as well as us. We also try to act as watchdogs to ensure development is as tasteful as possible in keeping with our upscale community and the history of our area. We cover all of Carlsbad as well as Encinitas and Olivenhain. Now, I know that eyes glaze over when the history of a group is mentioned, so I will be as brief as possible. I want you to understand how the atmosphere when we formed in 2009 was so different than it is now. In the summer of 2009, after the Carlsbad Planning Department approved a behemoth shopping center in the middle of our community in La Costa, with a 98,000 square foot big box, we organized such a big turnout at the city council meeting that there was overflow in the courtyard and residents spoke into the night. Several newspapers and local TV stations were also following the issue. We pointed out, among other things, that the developer, so sure of himself, had gone ahead with plans before even getting clearance from the Regional Water Quality Board. The city council put off the decision until the next week, when they nonetheless passed the development, and as a slap in the face to the residents, they increased the big box to 200,000 square feet. That's when we incorporated and slapped the city and the developer with a lawsuit. Following the lawsuit, where we received concessions from the developer, we have been involved in other issues which you can look up on our website if you're interested. We have also donated substantially or given seed money to groups which share our mission. So now let's fast forward to tonight. And we want you to know we welcome being a part of this constructive discussion and the creative proposal of the city staff, as well as the meaningful contributions of the developer, Lennar. We are hopeful that together with concerned citizens, we can come to an agreement which will be beneficial to all. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Friends of Aviara.
Hello, everyone. I see many of you in the audience who have been with us on this journey of over 12 years, actually, trying to have a development along the Ambrosia and Poinsettia corridors that fit with our community and that preserved a great deal of natural open space around our Aviara Oaks Middle and Elementary School. And we appreciate your support, and we're very happy to be here tonight. And we are particularly pleased that Lennar came to us and to everyone else in the community very early and said, we want to address your issues. We hear your concerns. We understand that you were raising the issue in a decade ago about the dangers posed to our community if there was a fire or a calamity because of the lack of poinsettia and because of the overflow traffic on Ambrosia, which endangered our children as they were going to and from the school. And they said, and we want to help you solve those problems. And so before they ever got to any of this negotiation or this part, they had already come to the table and said, we're going to take all development off of Ambrosia. And we hear you. We hear you, and you need to have that as open space, and that the children need to be free from excessive traffic as this community grows. That was a substantial financial sacrifice on Lennar's part, and I think all of our community should be very grateful to them that they were willing to make that before we ever got to this type of negotiation. And I really, really appreciate it because we'd been through a lot of different experiences before Lennar came along. What we have before us now is a proposal for the completion of Poinsettia faster than we would have seen it if we were waiting around for other sources of funding to come in, and we think that's demonstrated by the fire. It's very critical to the very safety of our community. Secondly, we have an opportunity to preserve so much more open space around the school campus, and that benefits the wildlife corridors. It benefits all of us who walk the trails. We have the opportunity to extend the trails and connect Aviara to the southeast quadrant of the city. We all know that extending the trails is very important and a number one concern in this community. And so we have the opportunity for this to go forward. We have a development that looks and feels like other developments in the area. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Cristala development, but that floor plan, that type of look is exactly what this is going to be. And that is, perfectly cohesive and will fit in with our community, and we're very grateful for that. And the fact that we have these additional benefits for the parks and other parts of the city, I think shows that all parts of the community care about what goes on in other sections of this city. And so for that reason, it demonstrates the real overall sense of community from Village of Carlsbad all the way out to the newer developments to do what's best for everyone in the community. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Preserve Calavera, and if I could ask you just to get close to the mic.
Okay. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not Diane Nygaard. My name is Karen Merrill. I'll be speaking on behalf of our organization. Preserve Calavera has a long history of working to protect the natural resources in this area. We support this proposed community agreement because it goes beyond the minimum requirements. Unheard of. The impact to sensitive southwestern willow scrub has been minimized. The bridge design, that span bridge, it would allow the wildlife movement through the canyon. The proposed off-site mitigation and restoration will leave this city with 3 important areas enhanced. The Poinsettia 61 area, the Veterans Park site, and the slopes next to Aviara Park. Of course, there are always impacts from development, but we believe that this proposed plan will provide some meaningful public benefits for the plants, for the wildlife, and for the people of this community. And I'd like to add that this process of resolution has really been a good, just a really good example of creative collaboration, and I'd like to thank everyone that was part of this effort too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our presentations, and just how about a round of applause for our presenters, for all of them. Most, if many, are not professional speakers, and they did just a great job in their presentations to you. Some housekeeping. Wanted to let you know that tonight's meeting is being video recorded. It will be available on the city website, as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be available on the city website. As we go into our breakout sessions, we're right on time. We know that some of you may want to use the restrooms, and so the restrooms, I think if you go out this door and turn left, you'll find the restrooms, and there'll be signage there as well. We'll break for a half hour here to our breakout sessions. We'll have representatives at the table. Introduce yourself to the person standing next to you. Partake in the treats in the back. Get informed about your areas of interest, and we'll reconvene in terms of the group for the last half hour. We'll reconvene right at 7 o'clock for the last half hour. I also want to let you know when the meeting concludes, the representatives from Lennar will be staying after, so if you have more questions about the Lennar development, they will be here to answer your questions after the meeting concludes. So we will see you at 7 o'clock. I could ask the presenters to come back up to the front of the room, and if the public could take their seats.
So I think you need to give one more reminder and say, if your comments have to do with the Lennar project, please relate them to this proposal. Otherwise, wait until after this section
Okay.
and go see
Okay.
Lennar.
Okay.
There's people asking all sorts of questions.
Right. So good job, everybody, on the food table back there. That worked out good. So as we get into the public comment section, we know that there were a lot of comments about the Lennar community and their proposal. The Lennar representatives will be staying after public comment to answer your comments. If you have a question about the Lennar community in terms of the next half hour and you'd like to ask that question, please have it relate to the proposal. So we're really interested if you can go back, comment on the topic of the community proposal. That's what we're interested to hear about. I promise you the full half hour. We're generally on schedule. I asked you before how many of you thought you'd like to speak, and there were 7 hands that went up. And let me just ask that question again. The reason I'm asking the question is I want to craft this next half-hour session to get maximum public input, and we have some options to do that, depending on how many people would like to speak. So how many people think that they would like to address? All right, it looks like we're still in the 7 to 10 range. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is, if you have just a brief comment, and you think you can get done in a minute or a minute and a half, you have a very brief comment, we're going to allow you to go first. We'd like you to line up here on this row right here. We have a handheld mic that we're going to ask you to speak into. So when you, I'll turn it off right now, but when you speak into the mic, kind of speak into it directly like this as opposed to this. A couple inches away from your lips. We want to make sure that everyone who wishes to speak has a chance to speak before anybody speaks twice, so we're not going to be doing like follow-up questions and on and on and on. So be thinking about how to do this as succinctly as possible and as directly as possible in terms of your input. Is there any questions before we get going? Okay, great. So if you could just please, for the record, state your name and a general location and where you are, and then you're good.
My name is Jason Hansen, and I live off of Cassia. I just had a question about Ambrosia with regards to right now, there's a little, almost like a turnaround that parents use when they're picking up their kids. With the piece that's not going to be developed now off of Ambrosia, is that going to be closed, or is that still necessary to be there, the little curb indention where people turn around?
Okay, who would be best positioned to answer that question? Sir, if you could turn on your mic.
I don't believe that's actually in our property. It's to the south in the school district property, so we actually have no control over that.
Is somebody from the city, could they answer that maybe if it needs to remain there? Maybe somebody from traffic or something like that. And that's fine if there's not.
I'm not familiar with that specific area, but if it's not part of this project, unless someone complains, we're not going to go do something. So if it's working now, don't complain.
No, I'm not complaining, but the reason why is we were told that this was part of the project and that that would be an entry to the project. So if the project, my thought was if the project's not going to happen, is that going to be closed as an entry? Because it is a hazard there at the school. For anybody that's picked up kids there and knows that. That's why I was asking.
I can answer that. The original entry into the homes that were planned along Ambrosia was actually a little north of that. That roadway has to do with different easement, different property owner. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not part of the project, and it wasn't where the access was going to occur.
So, but if people feel it is a hazard, then they should let us know and we can address that.
No one could turn around on that street if you moved it.
The next speaker.
Hi, I'm Paige DeCino. I live on Skyline. And just a quick comment. I want the audience to realize that the 4 nonprofits up here Oh, full disclosure, I'm with Preserve Calavera too, but I wasn't involved in this. I want you to know how hard they actually work to do this, and they are your watchdogs in this city, so I hope you appreciate all the work that they do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mary Holleran. My family has been a resident of Carlsbad for over 30 years, and I've been walking past the Buena Vista Reservoir for that much time as well, and I can't tell you how happy I am to see the group working together to try and make this park a reality. I've lived in South Carlsbad and I've lived in North Carlsbad, and the parks in this particular quadrant, the northwest quadrant, are limited in some ways, and it would be really nice to have another park, passive park, that would provide an opportunity for the new developments that are going in, and yeah, it's just, I'm really thrilled to see that it might be a reality.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Fred Sanquist. I live in Poinsettia Heights, and I'm also president of Bataquitas Lagoon Foundation. I just want to commend everybody at the table and Lennar for stepping up to the plate like they did, and all the nonprofits for what they did, because it's truly, the process is great. You know, I'm really impressed with what you did and how you came to a conclusion and avoided a lot of finger pointing and everything else, and got the job done. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yeah, hi, Tom Rudden. I live on Wilson Street in Carlsbad, right near the Buena Vista Reservoir Park future. I also want to thank the board for all their hard work, and especially Mary Ann for doing the whole deal here, as you've been involved in this for quite some time now. But we've got you beat. My father-in-law has been a resident. Closer? Oh. I'm sorry. My father-in-law has been a resident in Carlsbad for 54 years, so he's seen the I-5 go through. He actually had to give up a property right there on Pio Pico to have the frontage road built. And the other thing I have to ask would be, Lennar, thank you also. Are you involved with the park? I asked you earlier, but I'm doing this on behalf of the people that are here tonight for an answer on that. You think you're going to be involved with it, but I've always been an advocate of competitive bidding to, you know, keep the price down. And the other one would be, maybe that's it. I forgot what the other comment was. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, good evening. My name is Doug Dentino, and I live on Arland Road, which is in the neighborhood of the Buena Vista Reservoir. I am one of the original members of the Friends of the Buena Reservoir group. I feel that this is an outstanding solution to what we've been trying to accomplish. We had been having a little trouble raising $3 million to you know, fund the park and do all that. And so I'd like to say I think also this is a great coming together in solution. I think this could be groundbreaking on future community issues where we have a more global community look and we're getting out of the immediate neighborhood. I think that's great. I'd like to thank the people at Lennar stepping up. I'd like to thank our advocate groups in the city, and especially I'd like to thank Mary Ann Vinnie. She's been a great advocate for our project. She's kept it together, and I think that, thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you. My name is Brett Porath, and I'm a resident of Villadonna, which is just south of Poinsettia, near where it ends today. And I wanted to share some concerns about traffic flow. We've heard a lot about the impact on Cassia, the impact on Ambrosia, but nothing about the impact on Mimosa, Dove, and the neighborhood. And it's our feeling that we have two issues. We know that Poinsettia is going through, I think, I speak for everyone, but concerns when people leave the neighborhood from Skimmer and Oriole, they'll be crossing 2 lanes of traffic at a pretty high rate of speed at 50+ miles an hour. So we definitely need some traffic control so that people can safely enter and leave the neighborhood. And our second concern is that people will cut through the neighborhood. The quickest way, the shortest way, if you're coming from Poinsettia from this development or the surrounding area, if you're going to Vaughn's or Sinopolis or anywhere in that Paseo Real Plaza like Dove Library, is to come through that neighborhood. And those are residential streets not made for arterial sort of traffic. And our concern is that our neighborhood will become a throughway instead of a neighborhood traffic.
Thank you, and you guys are doing great. So just a reminder, again, your name and general area where you live, and you're doing great on the time, and we are recording this, and so as you ask your questions or your comments, both the city as well as this team up here will be reviewing those comments and questions.
My name is Michael Schertzer, and I live, My name is Michael Schertzer, and I live fairly close to the Buena Vista Reservoir, but I live on the south side of Carlsbad Village Drive. First of all, I really support the efforts made to create this proposal. I think it's a really great collaborative effort. And I also think that it is consistent with what the legislature of California would like to see, particularly with regard to property that's designated as surplus. The Buena Vista Reservoir is designated as surplus, underutilized or surplus. Definition pretty much is the same. And the state of California, in the government code actually, states that the legislature reaffirms that the property that is surplus should be made available for park space or open space purposes. And I think what they've done is they've been very consistent with this state policy, which I'm very impressed with, because it is an incredible parcel, and it's very difficult to evaluate the Buena Vista parcel without actually being there and going in the parcel. And we have had a couple meetings inside the reservoir area where people have actually looked out from this highland ridge, and it's an incredible view of the coastline. And this isn't looking at it from further east, where most of the highland areas are. This is right over Old Carlsbad, and between the Buena Vista Lagoon and the Hedionda Lagoon. And knowing its unique history, which I won't go into now, the fact that you could see the coastline, you're really looking at ancient Carlsbad that extended out 1 mile, going back 8,000 years, and you could really visualize how incredible it is. It's the trees are fabulous that you could see through, and with the gazebo that may be built on top of it, you'll be able to have an incredible historical view of Carlsbad. And we must remember that that reservoir was filled with water from the San Luis Rey River groundwater supply. So we actually participated a little bit in California history here by drinking and providing water for our agriculture. And this reservoir actually created...
Sir, if I can ask you to summarize so we can get to the
I
next
won't
speaker.
summarize. This is sufficient.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Mark Tanner, and I also live in the Viadana development. We live right on Poinsettia Skimmer Court, which is adjacent to Poinsettia Lane. I guess there's about 20 homes that are adjacent to Poinsettia Lane, and we're between El Camino and where the bridge is going to begin. And so needless to say, there's very little traffic right now going through there, and that's going to change. It's going to be a 4-lane highway. And I've already talked to Mr. Stern about this, about whether there's anything that can be done to ameliorate that noise that it is. I mean, we get one car that goes down Poinsettia. It's a dramatic noise. We now have a 4-lane highway going through it. It's going to change. It's going to change things for us and everybody on that street. So my only suggestion, and I know Lennar's been accommodating on a lot of this, from what I understand, and if there is an accommodation that can be made, I know that there's technology where you can rubberize the surface. I hear it's expensive, But if there's a way to rubberize the road so we can ameliorate that noise, we're only talking about maybe 1/10 of a mile there, but a lot of people are going to be impacted by the noise, and if something can be done that would help, it would be appreciated.
Okay, next speaker.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Sean Omid. I also live in Aviera on the Skimmer Court. So I have the same concern. We're looking at probably heavy traffic coming on Poinsettia from El Camino Real all the way going to Aviera. So my question is from the city and Lennar Homes. What are you going to do in order to mitigate the noise? What are the plans? We briefly discussed it. The plans that I see on the maps, they're just for looks, basically. It's not going to help us with reducing the noise. One suggestion that I have is possibly to plant dense and tall trees or shrubs right along the borderline in order to mitigate the noise, and also possibly install traffic lights right at the Skimmer and Poinsettia and where the new subdivision is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And so as we can hear, so that we can hear from as many members of the public, I want to kind of limit, dialogue back and forth. This is about capturing your ideas, your solutions, and then afterwards, kind of one-on-one conversations. So next speaker.
So I shouldn't direct a question to anyone individual? Absolutely. Okay. Hi, my name is Carl Krumrei, and I live in Viadana as well. And my first question, though, is to Ms. Weimer. When your group, Friends of Aviara, did you include the Pavo Real or the Viadana people in any of your negotiations with Lennar?
I believe that Lennar contacted the homeowners associations in those areas and dealt with them there. We have very few members of Friends of Aviara who are from that area, though.
Okay, because technically those communities are not Aviara, that's why I'm asking.
That's
they're very impacted. And I'm not sure regarding Lennar, because actually on their map they included Pavo Real in the Viadana community, and they misspelled the name Viadana, so not really sure how much communication they've had. But that said, you're supporting the road going through, and the concern I have is you mentioned as two things. One, as an access from the school, as a flow. So I have a great concern with that. And second, you talked about from the fire. Now I want to address the second point first, because I'd like to clear up any confusion on that. Nobody was getting out on that road if it was built through, if during that fire. Okay, there were 50 to 100-foot flames going through there 10 minutes after that fire started. Okay, it was not an exit route. All right. Secondly, I'd like to ask the question because right now traffic flows in a pattern where people come from Aviara, they turn right on Ambrosia, they go to the schools, and then they go north. And if they go all the way to the flow, they go up to Cassia, and then they come around. If the road goes through, people who need to come back south are going to take Poinsettia. And do you know what neighborhood they're going to go through?
Yes, I understand that they're going to go through that neighborhood your neighborhood if they're looking for cutoffs. But that's one of the reasons that this whole conversation has to include ways to mitigate and slow down the traffic on Poinsettia. Some of the things that have been talked about here today and have been suggested have been talked about are part of the ongoing process to try to address that, because even though we didn't have a lot of representation in our organization from your neighborhoods, we did know that they would be important to us and that they would be important to you as well.
Thank you.
But during the fire, one of the things that you need to understand is that Ambrosia wasn't designed to take all of the traffic that it has to bear because of the size of the Aviara Oaks campus. Aviara Oaks campus only has one way in and one way out, and both of those are on Ambrosia. So the problem during the fire was, from the early stages, before it ever even jumped, was that to get the fire trucks to Ambrosia, they couldn't get there. They couldn't go down Cassia, go up and then come down Cassia and get to us. They also couldn't come down Aviara Parkway. And that is why you saw parents leave their cars running on Ambrosia and having to flee on foot from the fire. That is why our kids had to, instead of being able to go to the area that was the safe area that the school designated that they go to, they couldn't go that way because of the fire and because there hadn't been any way to get any trucks over there. And so they had to actually walk past part of the fire and actually walk ultimately to a fire station because the fire trucks couldn't get there. And there were all sorts of other issues that were involved with traffic lights and things like that. So
But
we
ju-
think this is going to help.
But just to clarify, the fire started on the east side of El Camino.
Yes, and it jumped.
jumped, it went through the canyon. That part was already burning, so before anybody was evacuating from Aviara School, the fire had already jumped and it was already threatening the canyon and that road would have been impassable. But that said, let me go back to the one other point.
Sir, if I could just
I know-
ask you to
I-
summarize, so
yes,
go ahead.
yes,
Go ahead, please.
She did take quite a bit of time. There is no stop signs presently. If you come to the top of where that bridge and goes into Viadana, there are no stop signs all the way down to Aviara. There's no stop signs all the way down to the Dove Library, all the way to El Camino. So it is proven, and he's not here unfortunately, but Mr. Lynch, who works for the city, actually has told us that it does shave time to go through there. And I'm actually disappointed in the city of Carlsbad and in Lennar that there hasn't been more presented on this issue. These issues were raised over a year ago, and there's nothing in the document to address those at this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I think you've done a really nice job of coming together, and I just wanted to thank you all for that. Really, my concern.
If I could
don't
have your
know if it's a
name, just for the
concern.
record.
Oh, okay, it's Stacy King, and I live in the Bay Collection, right before Aviara, and my backyard is to Poinsettia. So kind of between Crystalline and Aviara. There's no really good map, but we are privy to a lot of the traffic on Poinsettia, which currently is 50 miles an hour. And it was raised, I'm thinking like maybe 6 years ago, something like that. And currently it is 50 miles an hour. I'm wondering if part of this process, if a traffic study could be redone to find out if maybe we could lower it to maybe 45, because kids do cross that street. All the Bay Collection kids go to Pacific Rim. Cars fly through that stoplight, and I'm just thinking if we could somehow get them to slow down, 5 miles per hour, that might be a really significant change. And the reason I'm asking for it at this point is because Poinsettia obviously hasn't gone all the way through, so it hasn't been a major arterial road other than, to do the Cassia deviation. So now that it is going to go from a considerable part east to all the way to the ocean, it will probably likely be a major arterial road. If we could lower the traffic, that would be great. If we could do some type of traffic study, maybe it's included in some of other people's concerns, that would be wonderful. And then, again, I think it might help with the traffic lights going all the way up that hill, because people are always gunning it to try to get through the traffic. There's so many lights, which I'm not going to complain about, but they gun it or they rev their engines to really get going afterwards. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Vicky Sayage. I live in Aviara, and I had two things. First, I wanted to say thank you all for not having any more development on Ambrosia. Aviara Oaks Middle and Aviara Oaks Elementary have a combined enrollment of 2,000 students per the Carlsbad Unified School District today. That is 18% of every single student in the entire school district. So to have 2,000 students and add, so getting rid of those apartments and having open space is just a huge, huge, amazing safety issue. My second point is, and I mentioned this to the individual tables, but I wanted it on the record, I'd like to ask the city to please ensure that the builder has, number one, money set aside for Buena Vista Park, that money is protected in case Lennar hits an economic downturn and declares bankruptcy, and three, that there's substantial penalties for the builder, substantial, to motivate them to get that park built soon and on time. I do not want to see another El Camino Real Toll Brothers construction delay issue with calling the city and saying, oops, we forgot to put that in the negotiations 10 years ago. So please hold their feet to the fire. And if for some reason they can't perform, make them pay, and make them pay handily, so maybe we get another park out of it. So thank you very much, and good night.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Teresa Curvin. Thank you. And I am a homeowner in the Viadana community. You've heard from many of us. I also represent the 82 homeowners that live in the Viadana community as their HOA board member. We, as one of our other board members shared, we are very concerned about the traffic that will be impacting our community. Right now, we enjoy our community is a very walkable community. We walk to the cinema, the theater, the urgent care, the post office, and many of our children walk to school and ride their bikes to school. And so having Poinsettia Lane open up without any calming traffic even considered. I've read your thorough plan for your draft of your project, and nowhere in here is there any traffic calming measures for our community. It seems that our community has been forgotten in this project plan, and our community will be the most greatly impacted community that will be impacted the most from your development. In addition, I want to mention about the fires, since you brought that up. I had 2 children on the campus when the fires hit, and I want to remind everyone that 1,800 students got off that campus without even a skinned knee. So they were thankfully out of harm's way very quickly and efficiently through the efforts of the staff at Aviara Oaks Middle and Aviara Oaks Elementary. So having said that, I do want to thank Lennar for taking the 17 homes off of the Ambrosia site, because that is a heavily impacted site. But I also want you to consider the kids of Viadana and Pavariel, because those 2 communities will be impacted. So thank you for your time.
Next speaker. And there's nobody behind you.
I'm Bill Pierce. My property backs up to Poinsettia, down by Bataquitos near the 5. So I'm here to say that my first reaction was, hey, in the mitigation section it says there's going to be no change in traffic. I couldn't believe that. I thought, because I've been living there 8.5 years, thinking when they put that bridge in, I wonder what it's going to be like. Because every year it gets louder, noisier, more people screeching down and having to stop at the red light at Bataquitos when they're going 50 miles an hour around a curve and don't see it. Recently we've had new turn lights installed, and when the sun goes down, it interferes with the turn lights so you don't get to turn left. So the traffic backs up. All kinds of little problems are happening at every different side street. So I want to remind people that, you know, Poinsettia is a long avenue that will now go from east to west. And when I looked at the traffic map on the city website, I could see, hey, I can go right out there and go north a little on Melrose and be faster on my way east. And everybody else is going to make that decision. In the traffic study for the mall, 9,000 people were supposed to leave Cannon and come all the way to Poinsettia to avoid that traffic buildup that they were expecting. So we know that people, you know, they're sentient beings, and they'll seek the shortest path and the quickest path. Right now, Poinsettia doesn't. It has like 21. Yesterday afternoon, 26 miles an hour up Poinsettia to get around at 4 p.m. Not that great. We need a full traffic plan on Poinsettia. Also, first thing I thought of about that land was the fire, and I remember quaking at that fire. And I think the city needs to be proactive, consider what can we do, how can we work with the professionals in the fire department to know what the latest technology is. Have them tell us what they need, you know, anything to support the helicopters, the crews, whatever. We need to start incorporating that in our planning. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone who hasn't spoke yet that wishes to speak? So seeing no hands, that's going to conclude that. Let me just ask our panelists if any final comments from you. Okay, I want to thank the members of the public again for joining us tonight. It was a 2-hour meeting. We are spot on time. kudos to the facilitation. But thank you sincerely. Thank you for taking the time, for being here. Thank you for the presenters. And this meeting is adjourned. Lennar will be here after the meeting to continue to take comments.